Before we begin, everybody, I would like to remind all of you that this is indeed going to be a spoiler review, as you can tell from the thumbnail, and if you do want to listen to my review about the game itself, go watch my review that I did back on September 4th. The link will be in the description, but for this video, we are mainly going to go over all the main story beats of the game that happened during the final act of Marvel's Spider-Man, primarily when you fight Dr. Octopus on top of Oscorp Tower, and everything that happens afterwards, and also talking about what those two post-credit scenes mean, discussing about the future of Spider-Man PS4. But without further ado, everybody, let's get into the video.
Yes. I guess if you design his equipment, you're bound to be a target too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry. Your secret's safe. You rest easy, knowing your secret is safe with me.
You do what you think is best, Doc. It's all any of us can.
Peter?
Even when it hurts like hell.
Peter, where are you going? Peter?
Even though Insomniac and Marvel told us all the way back at E3 2016 that this was going to be a Spider-Man universe that was fully original to this game, I wasn't prepared for how amazing it was going to be. As we all know, this particular iteration of Peter Parker has been Spider-Man for 8 years, has graduated college, and has a job as a scientist. But even though an extremely experienced Spider-Man and a very intelligent Peter Parker is nothing new to the Spider-Man lore, I was absolutely blown away seeing that Peter Parker was actually working for Dr. Otto Octavius before he turned into Dr. Octopus. And even though this game isn't necessarily an origin story for our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, it is in some ways an origin story for one of his greatest foes of Doc Ock. Throughout the game's promotion, it was intended that Mr. Negative was going to be a very big factor within Marvel's Spider-Man. And even though Martin Lee had a pretty big role within the game's story and was portrayed wonderfully by his actor of Stephen O. Young, it turned out that he was actually a red herring where Doc Ock was the main villain the entire time. During the game, you're constantly facing major threats throughout the city, but the main relationship that is focused here the most is between Peter Parker and Otto Octavius, voiced brilliantly by Yuri Lowenthal and William Salyers. Even though the relationship between Peter and MJ is a major highlight within the game's story, every time Otto and Peter were on screen together, I was always given this sense of bewilderment. Having the main theme of this story be Peter Parker and Spider-Man's worlds collide, include the downfall of Dr. Otto Octavius, was something that truly got me emotionally during the end of the game. This version of Peter Parker was on his way towards adulthood since he graduated college and found a job as Otto's lab assistant, but having them collide together during the end of the game made it even more heart-wrenching during that finale. While Otto revealed his true colors by the end of the game, his initial viewpoint of the world was to try and make it a better place through science and with his work. This is something that Peter absolutely admired throughout the story, and since he already lost Uncle Ben, he found a new father figure / mentor within Otto Octavius. And just knowing that every time you're working in the lab, you're slowly help build the octopus tentacles is something that I found truly ingenious from the Insomniac and Marvel writing team. Even though I could tell where the story was going, I was still guessing whether or not Doc would stay on the path of good or head towards the path of evil, and seeing him go towards this downfall was something very heartbreaking during the game's story. Especially seeing what a great connection Peter and Otto have with each other, it made it that much more emotionally impactful when Otto's story was finishing during the end of the game.
I came here to work for you because of what you've got up here. And that's not going anywhere. So neither am I. Doc's really sick. At this rate, he'll lose control of his motor functions within a year. And if we're not careful, an intracranial implant could make things even worse. Even alter his personality. We need to proceed carefully.
Thank you again, Peter. Don't know what I'd do without you.
Which is why I also have to give a huge praise to the writing team for handling Miles Morales in a very well-rounded way. The main complaint that people have with Miles is that he's basically just a copycat of Peter Parker with no variation whatsoever. However, the way on how John Paquette, Ben Arfman, and Christos Gage wrote Miles' character within this game is something that's absolutely commendable on their part. Just like how Otto was the mentor and Peter was the mentee, I felt the same way when it come to Miles and Peter, where Peter was the mentor and Miles was the mentee. Initially introducing Miles building up to the death of his father Jefferson Davis was something that I felt truly heart-wrenching and absolutely saddening seeing Miles in that position. Jefferson Davis was a huge family man and a great cop, and especially at the end of the day, a hero. So rather than having Miles try to follow in Peter's footsteps, he instead tries to follow in the footsteps of his late father. Rather than having Miles copy exactly what Peter does, he instead tries to embody everything that his dad represented. This makes it even more rewarding when Miles ends up getting bitten by the spider and gaining spider powers himself. Not only is this iteration of Miles his own unique individual from the loving and care from Rio and Jefferson, but you can also see the relationship blossom between him, Peter, and Spider-Man. While Jefferson taught Miles to never give up, Peter can eventually teach Miles in the future how to be a hero himself, and also the meaning of how with great power must also come great responsibility.
No. It's pretty weird, right? Not that weird.
And that whole mantra was easily put to the test by the very end of the game, with the utter fate of Aunt May actually dying by the end of the game. Since Doc Ock released the Devil's Breath serum upon New York City, tons of New York citizens were getting infected by this substance, including Aunt May herself. And since Peter obtained the Devil's Breath anti-serum after beating Doc Ock, he had a huge choice to make back at the feast shelter. Save Aunt May and let millions die, or have Dr. Morgan Michaels do his work and make more of the anti-serum in order to save everybody. Not only is this a great form of storytelling by totally embodying who Peter Parker is, but it also shows the wonderful relationship that Peter and Aunt May have with each other. Even though Peter loves Aunt May more than anything in the world, he had to do what was right in order to save everybody within the city, even if it did mean losing the only person left in his family that he truly cares about. And even though he cares a lot about Mary Jane and Miles Morales, he truly loves his one and only Aunt May. Which is why this moment in the story is not only a heartbreaking one, but it's also one of my personal favorites throughout the entire story. Even though the fate of New York City and Aunt May's life rests upon Peter's shoulders, he still will always do what is right for everybody in need. And even though this moment brought tears to my eyes, I believe it was absolutely earned narratively throughout the story of the game.
I don't know what to do.
Yes, you do.
But even though the ending of Marvel's Spider-Man may seem like a dark one, with the entire city being on the brink of destruction, Otto Octavius being sent to the raft, and Aunt May actually dying, there's still a bright side for Peter Parker where he gets back together with Mary Jane by the end of the story. Not only is their relationship truly an emotional roller coaster, but even after Peter lost the man that he looked up to the most and his own aunt, he still can find happiness even after the darkest of times. And just knowing how much they both love each other, it's clear to see how their relationship can only get better off from here.
I never stopped wanting to.
Me neither.
Although while everything may seem resolved by the end of the game, there still is something very sinister happening in the shadows. If there was anything that surprised me more than Peter working for Otto Octavius before he became Dr. Octopus, it was that Harry was never in Europe in the first place throughout the entirety of the game. During the game's promotion, we were told the entire time that Harry Osborn was off in Europe running business for Oscorp, while Peter can check in on his research stations located throughout New York City. But as it's revealed, Harry Osborn was in New York City throughout the entire game, located located within Norman Osborn's secret research lab. And if you're still a bit confused as to why Harry is like this, it's because his mom, Emily Osborn, was sick with a certain neurological disease. Not only was this disease the end of Emily, but it also was genetic and it passed on to Harry during his birth. And when Norman discovered that Harry was suffering the same fate as his mom, he tried his very best to develop a cure throughout different means of research at Oscorp. And this research that Norman was pursuing is what ended up creating Mr. Negative and also the substance of GR27, aka Devil's Breath. So not only was Devil's Breath supposed to be a cure for all kinds of genetic disease, but it was also supposed to be a cure for Harry Osborn. But since Doc Ock released the Devil's Breath upon New York City, Norman has no other choice but to keep Harry in the state that he's in. And clearly, as we see with all that black webbing wrapped around Harry, it's obvious to tell which direction they're going. Now, a lot of people may think that this is indeed a symbiote that's wrapped around Harry, and with that answer, they are half correct about it. While this is indeed looking like some form of venom, it's most likely not referring to the alien symbiote, but rather an ultimate version of Venom like we have seen in the game of Ultimate Spider-Man and even the Ultimate Comics. Like we know throughout the game, Devil's Breath was supposed to be a cure for all types of genetic disease, specifically them naming it to be a cure for cancer. And with that big reference dropped during the game, along with there being lots of spiders during their research in Norman's secret lab, it's very clear to see that they're taking heavy influence from the Ultimate Comics version of Venom.
What is that? It's our inheritance. Eddie's dad and my dad worked together before they died.
We believe the suit may be the final step. Finally, a cure for cancer.
Plus, if you find a certain backpack in New York, you'll see that Peter and Eddie Brock have actually known each other during Peter's past at the Daily Bugle. So not only is it great to know that Eddie Brock does exist within this universe, but it's even crazier to think that by the time we get another game, we may receive Venom as the main villain along with Green Goblin. And the reason why I say Green Goblin is obviously the huge foreshadowing of the green liquid going off of Norman's face, and also there being pumpkin bombs within the secret lab. Plus, if you look at that helmet that MJ wears during that part of her gameplay, you see on the top left-hand corner a reference to a glider of some kind. And knowing that Peter has been Spider-Man for 8 years and still hasn't faced off against Dr. Octopus, it's gonna be crazy to see how Insomniac is going to do this version of Green Goblin and Venom.
So you're gonna sit there with a straight fucking face and tell me Harry Osborn's got the symbiote on it? Is that the symbiote in it? Because it shoots out from him. You know, don't act like you don't know what you did.
Don't act like you
wrote it.
I like that shirt. I like that.
Why isn't this suit in the game? Why isn't this suit in the game?
I think that something like that suit deserves its day in the spotlight. And I think just making it a unlockable suit wouldn't be doing it justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best stories for Spider-Man.
Sure.
And I think that it's a complex story. I think that that story needs to be told, and needs to be told in the way that Insomniac would tell it.
Yeah,
I think my favorite.
We did it, Greg. We did it.
Spider-Man 2 confirmed everybody. It's the symbiote.
And given how great the writing was for a character like Dr. Octopus, it's going to be crazy how Insomniac is going to write characters like Green Goblin and Venom in the inevitable sequel. Plus, if they have Peter and Miles go toe-to-toe against Venom and Green Goblin, that's going to make one hell of a sequel. But even though I don't want to jump to conclusions just yet, I just really hope that the City That Never Sleeps DLC pack expands on this main story in some way. And if the main story for Spider-Man PS4 was this good, I can't wait to see what the DLC is going to feature. But anyways, guys, that was my spoiler review for Spider-Man PS4, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What did you think of the crazy post-credit scenes for Spider-Man PS4, and how do you feel about Harry being Venom and Miles being Spider-Man and Norman possibly turning into the Green Goblin? Either way, this game is phenomenal on every level for me, and I just can't wait to see where this story goes next. But anyways, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
I love you, son.